Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Jeannie. I am a 6'2" self-projected projector, and today it's going to be a really short video. I want to talk about recognition. I've already talked a little bit about waiting for the invitation, but there's this component that comes before the invitation, which is recognition. And if we don't have like a great relationship with the concept of recognition, it can impact the quality of invitations we receive. I say this because as I've been doing a lot of inner work and working to improve myself and grow and evolve and all those good things, I realized that as a child I suffered from a lot of emotional neglect. And when you experience emotional neglect, any sort of attention, even if it's not healthy, can feel really, really good, because it feels like there's just this huge hole, or the image that came to mind is kind of like a well that's got no water. It's completely dry, and all of a sudden you're getting a lot of attention. There's a lot of water coming into the well. It's going to feel really good when that starts to fill up, right? But just because we receive recognition doesn't mean it's coming from someone who's healthy. I feel like many times, when I look back, I kind of was really vulnerable to I was too open to allowing people who were had narcissistic tendencies or things like that come into my life, and it wasn't healthy. It wasn't safe. So I want to talk a bit about this concept of recognition. Again, this is something that we want to look for before the invitation. So what this could look like is let's say for a job, you first get recognized for the contribution you're making, or your skills, or what you bring to the table, whatever that may be, and then you get an invitation for a promotion, or to move to a different town and start representing the company there, whatever it may be. In a relationship, it could sound like someone saying and expressing what you mean to them, qualities of your personality, of who you are, not just the physical stuff. And then comes the invitation, hey, would you like to go out with me, or would you like to start a relationship, or would you like to marry me, that sort of thing. So those are just two main examples that I'm going to use to kind of get those wheels turning as to what to look for. But the other component I want to talk about is the importance of recognizing ourselves first. Scoot this back a little bit. Okay. There's this universal principle of how our internal world, or let me put it this way, our external world is going to mirror what's going on inside of us. So let's say that a huge source of bitterness for projectors could be not receiving recognition, not feeling successful, or not feeling, that theme of success. So we tend to give away our power by looking outside, by looking for validation, for finding people, and we can slip into the energy of trying to prove ourselves and what we can do and what we can see, and it can turn into a very clingy energy that is, instead of going to naturally magnetize what we want to us, it's going to repel it, because people are going to feel it because of our penetrating aura, right? So the key to solving this issue, or this experience, when I say issue, I don't mean it in a negative way. It's just, this is what we're facing. What can we do about this, so that we can experience a better experience? Okay, so we always want to start by going within, looking within, And if we're talking about this concept of recognition, we're gonna look within and see what can we recognize ourselves for, so that this way that external world will mirror back to us what we're recognizing ourselves for. Okay, so I did do a post on this on Instagram that just kind of like mentions these points, and here I'm going to go a little bit deeper, but yeah, you can kind of like refer to that post if you want a quick refresh. Okay, so in this post I mentioned that many times, like, the things that we're really good at, we tend to be like a little bit blind to them because we can take them for granted. We can assume that the way we see things is the way that everyone sees them, or the way that we do things is the way that everyone does them, and that's not necessarily true, you know. The way we experience life, there's this huge part of like perception, right? Our perception impacts the experience we have, and everybody's perception is different. This is why, you know, like, for example, in a family dynamic, if you had siblings, their experience of your parents, even though they could have been the same, like, mom or the same dad, or the same mom and dad, is different than your experience because of your perception, you know, and plus a bunch of other things that can impact this. But let's try to keep it simple so that I don't go on and on and on and on for an hour. Okay, so I was talking about how many times we can take the things that come to us naturally for granted, to the point that we don't see them as gifts. Okay, we assume that everybody knows this, or, you know, thinks like us, or feels things like we do, and things like that. So human design can help us tap into these gifts, and I prefer to say it more like human design can help us remember what our gifts are, or it can help us create more awareness around what our gifts are. And I'm going to mention a few things to look for in your chart. If you would like help, you could always, you know, look for a reader, or, you know, do your own research deeper into this, because obviously, you know, it's going to vary depending on your chart and how things connect and things like that. But anyways, one of the things that you can look at is your defined centers. Defined centers are the centers that we have consistent access to. So the energy there, especially when it's aligned, and this is like what we want to look for, is it in alignment? Because if it's not in alignment, it could still not be working, you know, to the highest potential it could possibly be working. So defined centers, the energy there when it's aligned can be very, very potent. Channels, they give us insights as to like how our centers connect, and we can look up like what those channels, the energetics of those channels are. We can look at the description of those channels and see what the energetics are there, and learn to leverage them to our advantage. Because one of the things is sometimes how human design words things is we're either seen as this or we're not. So if we have the choice, or we have a little bit more say into like how we're seen, I would prefer to tend to lean towards, like, you know, being recognized. For example, I have the Genius to Free channel. I would rather work more on the side of being seen as a genius versus the freak, and not so much from like stroking my ego. It's just a different experience. When you're seen as a freak, doesn't always feel good. Especially like if you haven't done the work to like keep yourself grounded and, like, you know, trusting yourself. It can help. It can, not that it helps, it can bring us down, like, and it can start creating these beliefs within us that are not going to serve us. Like, I'm always seen as a freak, nobody wants to know what I have to say. And it's not necessarily like that, you know. It's like, okay, I've been focusing on the wrong people, let me focus on the right people, call them in, so that I can make my contribution, so that I can be recognized and I can be invited. Different energetics there, right? Okay, your conscious sun. This is going to be like on the right hand of your chart, the very first number on the top. That's your conscious sun. This makes up 70% of our energy. Personally, I like to go to the gene keys for this because it gives me more information to work with and play with. I find that sometimes within the human design system, I don't have enough information to play with, and the gene keys, it just gives me more ideas, like more stuff to like, ooh, what if I do it that way, or what if you do it this way, you know, it gives me more to play with. So, and it also, like, I like how it divides into like the shadow, the gift, and the city. So you can focus more so on the gift and how to embody the gift, and do this in like very small increments. Like, don't think you have to tackle the entire gift at once. Small steps to help you step into the gift frequency, you know, and compound those is going to get you a lot farther than, you know, trying to do everything at once. Circuitry for me made a really big impact, but it's because like I have a lot of individual circuitry, so it depends. Take a look at your circuitry, and what circuitry tells me is how we interact with others. Like, having a lot of individual circuitry, I'm pretty okay with working on my own. I tend to have a hard time, like, you know, fitting in with the tribe or the collective. Doesn't mean it's hopeless. It's just like I've had to learn certain social skills that I didn't have in order to be able to kind of like work peacefully within the tribe and the collective. If you have like a lot of tribal circuitry or a lot of collective circuitry, well then, you know, your experience is going to be a little bit different. But circuitry can tell us like how we receive, transform, and express energy. And again, it can show us like in which type of environment it's much easier for us to make an impact, to share our gifts with the world. Okay, gates. Gates, again, when they're defined, these are energies we have consistent access to, right? So personally, I like to look at which centers have a lot of gates defined, even if the centers aren't defined. And each center has like a different number of gates. Not all of them have the same amount, right? For example, let's say you have an undefined head. The head has only 3 gates, but if you've got all of those 3 gates defined, I would look into that. I would look into that and see, you know, how you can use the head center even though it's not connected to anything. I don't know, human design says that if it's not defined, like for example, let's take the ajna, if it's not defined, you're not here to share your ideas. Personally, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm not going to go into it today just because I want to keep myself focused on recognition. So gates is another thing you can look at to start seeing what you're remembering or creating awareness around what your gifts are. The next thing I want to mention, it's the last one, undefined centers. This is where we take in energy, okay? And many times they say, you know, that's the undefined centers aren't necessarily our strong suit. And that's how I've heard people say it before. I'm not saying it's wrong or right. This is how I see it. Because undefined centers take in energy, many times we can use these centers. Okay, let me say it this way. Hold on. Okay, undefined centers. This is where we take in energy, right? And it's like the more openness we have in our charts, like the more sensitive we can be to our environment. And undefined centers have this quality of like not only absorbing information, but they can in a way mirror things back to people. And this is where like we can experience like projection and things like that. So one, these centers help us like learn. They help us become wiser about like the energy of these centers because we can experience it in more variety as opposed to like when it's defined. Okay, so we can use these centers, these undefined centers, to mirror things back to people and help them see their blind spots. So really any aspect of your chart can help you discover, remember, create awareness around your gifts. It's just like, how are you seeing it? How are you approaching it? So these are the ways I mentioned are not the only ways. These are just kind of like the quick ones that are the main ones that came to mind to start giving you ideas on like where to look. If you're doing this work, like I mentioned before, with someone that can guide you, it can go a little bit quicker and it can save you time. But like most of the work that I've done it on my own. So don't create a belief that you can't do this on your own. You can totally do this on your own if that's what you want. And if you want help, reach out, find someone that you resonate with, or that you kind of like can feel that they can help you, you know. And my recommendation is, because right now there's like a lot of chatter within the human design community of like, you know, people who don't stick to source material, like, and the people who do, and it's all this stuff. And I'm like, trust yourself. Personally, I have found that I like to get a taste, but I am taste cognition and I am markets environment. I don't know if that, I mean, I want to say it plays somewhat of a factor, and also your authority. You know, if you're an emotional authority, maybe you need to wait it out a little bit longer. But for me, I found that it varies. Sometimes like I know I want to work with someone, but I mostly tend to lean towards like, let me get a taste for their work and then feel into if they're a right fit. Now what I've noticed is that because I do things so differently, it's been a little bit challenging for me to find someone who I'm like, yes, this is my person. So I'm kind of like starting to create this content in the way that like I wish it would have been explained to me. And I'm also kind of like realizing, okay, maybe if you can't really find someone yet, like I'm not giving up on that, but maybe it's because you're meant to like teach it in your own unique way, or not even teach it, but like explain it and share it through the lens of like your experience and how you see it and things like that. So let me see if there's anything else I want to mention. Otherwise, this is going to be pretty short and sweet. Those are the main ones. Like I said, there are other. Okay, let's do this one. Another thing we can do is look. There are questions we can ask ourselves, right? What are our interests? What are the things we like to think about, talk about, study? What are the things we like to do? Are you someone that likes to be out in nature? Like, how can you share your love for being out in nature? Like, if you like to hike certain trails, you know, teach people about that. And by people like seeing your enthusiasm and your love for that, you can ignite something within them, you know. And maybe they were someone who thought they didn't like nature, but by, you know, seeing how you explain things and how you see things and how you feel things when you're out in nature, that could be something that would like ignite someone like me and say, oh, well, I think I want to experience that. Like, what's that like? Like, that sounds interesting to me, you know. So your interests can really help you create awareness on what your gifts are. Another thing, sorry, structuring, ask the people that you know that are around you often, like, hey, what do you think that I'm really good at? Or like, when you think of me, like, what would you come to me for? Like, if you needed help with something and you thought of me specifically, like, what would you come to me for? You can ask yourself, like, what do people usually come to me for? For example, if you're a really good cook, do people come and ask for like your recipes, or do they ask you to help them cook or to cater or things like that? So really, it's just, again, about creating awareness and starting to open up our mind and like get the wheels turning, because the way the brain works, it's like, the more we tell it, like, I don't know what my gifts are, I can't see my gifts, like, the more it's gonna close us off to being able to see our gifts, because our brain's like, oh, okay, she doesn't want to see what her gifts are, so like, let's keep them, you know, out of her awareness or out of her sight so that she doesn't see them. So what we have to do is like change gears, flip the switch and go, okay, now I want to see what my gifts are. I want to see how I help people. So our brain and the world and life is going to bring us experiences and people and information that are going to help us identify what our gifts are and what we're good at. Now, another part of this is, if you want to go even deeper, is like really learning to own what our gifts are and feel confident in that, yes, this is what I do and I do it really well. And I feel like many times, in my case, it's been like not owning my gifts or feeling like bad, feeling guilty about these gifts. And here's where you can kind of like bring in your transferred motivation? I think it's a transferred motivation. For me, it's guilt. So, you know, I've kind of like, okay, another part of this, sorry, was me growing up and being taught to be humble. And for me, that meant like, don't brag about your gifts, don't show off your gifts, because that makes people feel bad or makes them feel uncomfortable because, you know, maybe you have more abilities or things like that than other people. And it's not necessarily like that. It's like, I think we all have gifts. It's just like we need to kind of like dig them up and allow them to shine, allow them to come through, allow them to be used. And when we use our gifts to be of service, like that is something that's very, very good. It's something that we should be proud of in a healthy way, you know, that we get to be confident about and that we get to feel really, really good about it. So, yeah. It all starts with us. How comfortable how comfortable are we with, you know, our gifts and stepping into them and using them for good and sharing them. And, you know, like I am a 6'2", but I think even if you're not a 6'2", which is like the role model, you can still like be an example for people. It's like, oh, this is how they do it. Like, so interesting. Like, I never thought of doing it that way. Like, maybe I don't want to do it that way, but like I enjoyed seeing how they do things, and maybe like I learned one thing and I want to take that with me and incorporate it, you know. Anything's possible. So homework is start, you know, looking into like, what are your gifts? What can you start recognizing yourself for? And then what you will start seeing is, because the external world is going to mirror our internal world, like don't be surprised if you have people coming to you and saying, hey, you're really good at like everything, all the lists that you made in your head, or like if you write it down, if you like to journal, people are going to start mirroring a lot, if not all, of the things that you said, that you put down on your list, that you recognize yourself for. I did this once. I was one of the big themes that I've been working through is like my fear of people and my fear of like social interactions. And I had this belief, like I formed this belief that like people don't like talking to me, I'm not good at talking to people and things like that. So one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to turn this around. Like, that doesn't have to be the truth. That doesn't have to be my experience. Like, and it isn't necessarily true. Like, I have experienced people who really do like having conversations with me, who love to talk to me, who walk away feeling like different just by having a brief interaction with me. So I'm going to drop that story. That story is no longer serving me. And from this point forward, my new belief is going to be like, people really love to talk to me. And as I was working, I was cleaning houses back then. I was working and I just kept repeating my mantra, my affirmation. People live to talk to me. People live to talk to me. I was even singing about it, like, people live to talk to me. And a few minutes later, like the lady of the house walks in and she just starts talking and talking and talking. Normally she didn't really talk a lot to me, or a lot with me, and we just started talking and talking and talking, and she said, you know what, I really love talking to you. And then I started, you know, giggling, because I'm like, oh, my affirmation's working. Like, of course it's working. Like, of course it had to work, because this is the new energy, this is the new experience I'm stepping into. So again, very quick shift. Like, I hadn't even been doing that for like 30 minutes, and you know, my experience shifted into something that was not only like felt really good for me, but also, you know, felt really good for somebody else. So that's just a quick little real life example of how this works, or how it has worked for me. This is how it can work for you. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. As usual, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Jamie Salcedo. If you would like to leave a comment down below, any takeaways, any insights, anything you want to try for yourself in practice, if you have any of your gifts that you want to start recognizing yourself for, pop them down below so that we can recognize you for them too. And yeah, I already mentioned my Instagram handle. There's more information there and on my website if you're interested in working with me. You can send me a message through Instagram, or you can find more information on my website. But yeah, otherwise, that's it. I hope you guys are having a fabulous day, and I will see y'all next time.